Good afternoon. I'm Christine Taylor Lewis, and on behalf of the Afro-American Historical Association of Fauquier County, I thank you for your continued support and welcome you to this, our 18th in a series of conversations with family historians and others who will share their genealogy research or provide information related to local African Americans and their history. As I mentioned on each of these events, part of the mission here at AAHA is to collect, document, and preserve and share US history with a focus on African Americans in Fauquier County. We hope that these virtual events will remind you of the richness of our history and our culture here in Fauquier. So we encourage you to visit our webpage at aahafauquier.org, where you will find a link to historical photographs, artifacts, books, and ongoing projects, as well as videos of previous social media events. And there's also an interactive story map, which gives individual histories of African American communities, churches, and schools in Fauquier County. There's also a link to news stories about some of the persons, places, and events that keep the AAHA mission and goals alive. So please visit us at aahafauquier.org. Meanwhile, we are pleased to announce that on the coming Saturday, October 1st, from 3 o'clock to 3:30 p.m., rain or shine, that will be a grand opening for our Digital Map Center. And this will take place at our offices here at 4243 Loudon Avenue, The Plains. So we invite you to join us for the unveiling of this project and its new webpage. I want to note also that the grand opening will be hosted during the 3rd annual Music in the Plains Day. And that goes on from 11 o'clock to 6 p.m. And the car show will follow from 8 o'clock to 12. And AAHA, during our grand opening, will be providing a brief demonstration on how to find and use the new maps, as well as to answer any questions that you may have. Also, this year marks AAHA's 30th anniversary. So in commemoration, there have been weekly posts on our Facebook page for the past 14 Thursdays, which describe some of AAHA's various initiatives, programs, and services over time. And the theme for these posts have been down through the years. So we invite you to take a look at our Facebook page if you haven't already done so. One more thing I want to mention is that some of you might have noticed on the events link on the AAHA webpage that the guest for today's event has been changed. We had previously scheduled a visit from Darlene Green, who is the church clerk at Mount Morris Baptist Church in Hume. And she was to talk to us about maintaining church history records. Mm-hmm. But the woman who had trained Darlene to become a church clerk, Mrs. Mildred Gaskins, recently passed away, and her funeral service is being held as we speak. So Darlene's visit has been rescheduled to early next year. And of course, we extend our condolences to the personal family, as well as the church family of Mrs. Mildred Gaskins. Now, today's event will be a conversation about genealogy. Our guest is someone I've met only recently, but I grew up knowing his father and graduated from high school with his mother. I find him to be a pleasant person to talk with, and he's certainly knowledgeable about genealogy and history. Rodney Cash Jr. was born in August 1964 in Warrenton, Virginia. His parents are Mary Edmonds Cash and Rodney Cash Sr. He is married to Shirley Williams Cash. Rodney attended Fauquier County Public Schools from kindergarten to 12th, and he served in the United States Marine Corps from 1984 until 1988. He has been employed primarily in warehousing and logistics. He's currently self-employed. Rodney has an interest in collecting information concerning African life and existence. So, hello, Rodney.
Good afternoon to you and your guests.
Thank you, and we welcome you. And we thank you so much for stepping in at this late notice, but we are delighted to have you with us today.
Okay, thank you.
So please give my personal regards to both of your parents.
I'll do that.
Okay. So what I would like to do, as we normally do, is to ask you a few questions related to genealogy. And then we'll move on to your family lines, if that's okay.
Okay.
Okay. And feel free to offer any books or visuals that you might have handy.
Got them right here.
Okay, good. So first, tell us how you became interested in doing your own genealogy research.
Primarily growing up in Warrenton, Virginia, I was surrounded by family, particularly my father's family, because Daddy was born and raised in Warrenton.
Right.
So everybody was like, "Yo, cuz, what's up, cuz? How you doing, cuz?"
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. And you know, the older people never explained to me how we were kin to this person, that person, this person, that person. So my mind being what it was, I just wanted to fill in the gaps and get a further understanding. Say, well, how are we kin to this family, these persons, and so on and so forth. That it kind of pretty much started from there. And
Okay.
also just growing up in Warrenton, I used to spend a lot of time at the Fauquier Library, where it used to be, across from the courthouse, not where it is now. But I was spending all day there, just looking for images, looking for narratives on, you know, African-American people. And of course, Fauquier being Fauquier, Virginia being Virginia,
Yes.
there was little to nothing there.
Yes.
So I've been pretty much on a, I guess now like a 40, not 45, almost a 50-year journey trying to put pieces of information together to get a larger picture, kind of like one of those 1,000-piece puzzles,
Right.
and just putting pieces together to get a larger picture. So I'm 58 now, and that's where I am with it right now.
Okay, so you knew, as we know, most people in Fauquier County are related somehow.
Yeah.
So it was easy to call you cuz.
Yeah.
And all the pieces are available. It's just a matter of where to put them.
Yes.
And that got you interested. So how far back in years can you go?
Well, with this,
tracing your ancestry.
I don't know if you can see it well, but I've been able to compile a family tree on ancestry.com.
Okay.
And depending on the branch, I can go back into at least the early 1800s.
Oh, okay.
Or the late, like the last quarter of the 18th century. And that's everybody I'm directly related to. And it's just that's been pretty amazing just to do that.
Yes, indeed. I know, and it's exciting once you find a relative or an ancestor, especially in the 19th century. It can be very exciting.
And of course, the technology has been very helpful in the past 25 to 30 years, because with the internet and with all of these documents being transcribed online, it's just help, you know, once you get past some of the misspellings of family members' names, like, okay, now we can, okay, I know who that is, I know who this is, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So what are the resources that you've used?
I started taking notes from older family members as particularly when I came back from California in '88, because there were a lot of people I knew. I guess I'm getting to be like one of the older cousins now. So I actually know some of my relatives' grandparents, great grandparents, because I knew them in Warrenton. I knew them growing up, but they have moved away. Some are in California, some are in Las Vegas. They don't know their grandparents, but you know, their grandparents may have been my a great aunt or a great uncle or so. And then from there, it's just like I said, with Ancestry, I've been on primarily Ancestry. I just took notes and just start putting names into the in the search engine, and you know, they start spitting back records and
Right.
hints, and that's been very helpful. I
Right.
think I may have found one of my great grandmas on the Edmonds side. And I never knew her name. I had my great grandfather's name, Abner Edmonds, but I didn't know his wife's name.
Oh my. And its ancestry gave you that
Yeah.
information. That's great. So which one of those found you most helpful? Was it through the technology or talking to others?
The technology has ramped things up.
Yeah.
It's ramped things up because as the records get transcribed and compiled online, you can access them more readily than going through court records and trying to find family Bibles and things like that. My cousin Stephanie Addison Mudd is more of a genealogist than I ever will be, but she's crawled up under houses and caves. So I can still consider her the expert, even though she's younger than I am.
Yeah, she's excellent. She lives and breathes genealogy.
Yes, she does.
That's a marvelous thing. So did you find any surprises during your research that you want to talk about?
No surprises. It's just, I just wanted to fill in these gaps and know who I'm descended from.
Right.
I mean, I grew up with my grandparents on my mother's parents. I had my great grandparents on daddy and Aunt Nessa's side, the Bumleys.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm from down Bristersburg. I even got lines of folks I'm kin to up on that end of the county that I wasn't aware of, but the research shows, well, this is where my grandmother Orange Edmonds was actually born in Marshall.
Oh, is that right?
Her father was a tenant farmer, so that's where he met her mother. My mother everybody calls her Grandma Jeannie, but her name was Eugenia Braxton Orange. So she's from up on that end, and her family, the Braxtons. So as you roam around with this information, you find out, oh, I do have kin people on the other end of the county.
Right.
And then you just have more firmer information concerning that.
Yeah.
So, but no big surprises. Not as I tell my younger relatives or anybody that's concerned to listen, I say I find the extraordinary in the ordinary.
Yes.
Because there's nobody was like quote unquote famous or had any type of local or state or national renown. They were pretty humble folks, and by the census records, all I saw was laborer, farm laborer, or women. They were domestics or homemakers.
Yeah, just ordinary people.
Yeah, but because they strove and they lived, that's why I'm here today.
So do you have any advice that you would give to anyone who is doing research in genealogy or family history for the first time?
The first thing I would say is compile as much information in notes and organize them better than I have, because I have stuff written from 30 years ago and that's sitting in front of me now. And unfortunately, the family members are deceased, but at least I have names to put into a search engine and see what primarily ancestry, what it kicks back to me.
Okay. So you would tell them just to make sure that they compile as much information as possible.
Yes.
And put it in some kind of organized way.
Yeah, and if it's a family Bible, if it's word of mouth, write it down and start looking and see what records there are on, even if they're deceased, even if it's from 100 or more years ago, because more and more information is being uploaded onto
into technology.
Yeah, because of the technology.
Yeah, Ancestry and Family Search is another engine that people use often. I do want to announce to those who are with us today that if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them on the chat, and we will come back and review them. I see we have one already.
Okay.
Jack.
How you doing, buddy?
Angela's asking, what was the name of the speaker's Edmonds ancestor in Marshall? What was
there were no Edmonds. Oh, you know what? Let me stop right there. I do have an Edmonds ancestor up from Hume. I found through the work of Miss Ann Van Ryzen, the Warrenton Antiquarian Society. She introduced me to an uncle, a great uncle, Thomas Edmonds, who I found out became the first pastor of Mount Nebo up there in
Ah,
Hume. He was
my.
he was elected. It's on the church website. He was born enslaved in Virginia. He was moved out west to Missouri with his slave owners. I believe they were Lewis's. And then he around the time of the Civil War, he joined the Union Army, U.S. colored troops, and mustered out in Alabama after the war was over, and then made his way back to Virginia, and ended up being on the northern end of Fauquier County. So that was interesting to know, because I found at least
That's amazing.
3 blood family members and 1 who married into the family that were in U.S. colored troops.
Oh, that's amazing. Because Angela attends Mount Nebo, so I'm sure she's familiar with some of that. That's amazing. So what I'm going to do is start with the Edmonds line and ask a few questions, and then we'll move over to the Cashes, if that's okay.
Okay.
So do you know where your earliest Edmonds ancestors were from? Were they from Hume or?
Well, once again, thanks to Miss Ann Van Ryzen and my cousin Stephanie Addison Mudd.
Yes.
Come to find out that our earliest Edmonds ancestor actually was from down here in Prince William County. There's a Presbyterian church over there on Ashton Avenue not far from the Costco, where the slave owner William Montgomery had a child by, I don't know if she was a recent African import or family had been here for a while. Her name was Amy, and had a child by her, and that was my great grandmother Mima. I don't know if that's from an African name or short for Jemima. And he was the ancestress of my great grandfather Abner Edmonds, his brother Thomas, the first pastor of Mount Nebo, and they had some sisters, and they also had some younger brothers who went by the name of Claiborne. Now, Grandma Mima, because of the will, I think it was what's his name, the Fitzhugh man, Giles Fitzhugh.
Giles.
Is his name? I think his name was Giles Fitzhugh.
Giles, yes.
Yeah. So yes. He freed her in his will. Stephanie, of course, call me, tell me if I'm wrong or not, and sent her and the younger children to Lebanon, Ohio, and that's where they grew up. And then Uncle Archie, one of the younger children, his brother also joined the U.S. colored troops, and Uncle Archie is buried in the I think it's outside of Charleston, South Carolina. He died in the Battle of Honey Hill. And the older children who went by the name of Edmonds, they remained they were kept in Virginia because it was said that they were such great workers.
Oh.
And that's where the Edmonds have been since up in, the 2 acres my parents have their house on is Edmonds land that we got from the nurse family. And then through the woods is my uncle's house. On the other side of the property is where my great aunt Lucy Edmonds, my grandfather's aunt, lived. And that's where the family cemetery is.
So how far back does this go?
This goes back into the late 1700s. Late 18th century. So
wow, that's awesome. So someone is pointing out that they admire Ruth Solomon. She says, I admire the level of detail in your family story. Congratulations on
thank you.
Discovering so much information.
Yeah, well, I had the help of a few people because Ms. Van Ryzen would ask me, did you know who Linton Edmonds is? That's where I met her up at the AAHA Center when she was giving a presentation. Yeah, on the Weston Farm, and I introduced myself after she spoke, and I said, well, Linton Edmonds is my great grandfather, and when they had the open house down there, they were just like, I was like a rock star or something like that. Hey, because his name is on the labor contracts Charles Norris wrote. Awesome. So he's Linton Edmonds. I said, yeah, that's my great grandfather.
My. So throw out some other family names that you.
Who is on here?
What
On the
monsters?
Edmonds side, my grandfather's name was Marion Fritz Edmonds, Marion Henry Edmonds Senior.
Okay.
That was my grandfather, granddaddy. He was a very important person in my life growing up until he passed away in '74. But being down on the Edmonds land and property on the weekends in the summer, it just kind of grounded me in terms of historical research, because my family had been on that land since after I call it the enslavement regime. After that ended, after the Civil War, and it was like a period in between the segregation regime was set up. We had been back on that land since that time for 150 years.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's marvelous. So, in what community where most of the Edmonds is found?
It would be in Casanova.
Casanova?
Like 7 miles outside of Warrenton. Not far as the crow flies, but I guess with you back in my grandpa's time, it was like you was out in the country. If you wasn't from town, you was in the country.
Right. Yeah, I was in Warrenton, so
yeah,
we called that the boonies.
Yeah. And then I had a granddaddy, because Uncle Z and Aunt Lucy were his the last surviving uncle and aunt that he had that I recall. And Uncle we called him Uncle Z.
Uncle Z.
But his name was Eleazar Edmonds, and he had like 90 acres down by Crossroads Baptist Church going towards Bristolsburg.
Is that right?
That's primarily where the Edmonds were.
So you said most of your ancestors the men were farmers?
Yes.
Do you know of any other occupations that they had?
No, that's why it was very dull and very boring and bland to see that, during the segregation regime, it was laborer, farm labor, farm labor. But the interesting thing was, I didn't have, because I was pretty much brought into the labor system when I was a little boy going to my grandparents' house, because we had the big garden, that was your granddaddy's garden, the little garden, granny's garden, and you had to do, I know I had to do. I can't speak for my cousins, but
yeah, the big garden and the little garden.
The big garden and the little garden. And then I had to help slop the hogs, get water from the well, and wood from the wood pile. We also had coal. So there was just things. What I remember the most about my grandparents' home was it was always a place of production. You couldn't come there. You couldn't come there and sit around and watch cartoons if you can get the reception. But you had you were put to work. So that's kind of
it's awesome.
Help me with, well, not help me, but that's the foundation of my work ethic now.
Yes.
So you had to do these things, and it was just, it was fun.
Yeah.
It wasn't fun at the time, but looking back on it, it's like, man, I'm glad they made me do these things, because it shaped my personality and so
That's right. And build that strong work ethic.
Yep.
So where do most of them attend church?
They Walnut Grove Baptist Church. Thanks to my grandmother, Edna Orange Edmonds. She was born in Marshall. Her father was Harry Orange. He was really from Culpeper, but the Oranges, I found out, this is another line coming from my grandmother, originally from Goochland, and came up to Culpeper after the Civil War was over. And that's where my great-great-grandfather, Jackson Orange, established himself and his family. And they were primarily tenant farmers. And the women were either domestics or they were homemakers. And everything that entailed. This is why I keep saying there's a lot of extraordinary in the ordinary. And that's where he, working in northern Fauquier County with his brothers, that's where he met my great-grandmother, Eugenia Braxton Orange.
Eugenia Braxton Orange? Yep. Are they the ones from Marshall?
The Braxtons are on that end. That's another family line, because it's not just my people I'm directly descended from. It's from those who married into those lines, that that it really was like the branches and creeks flowing into a river, because they married into those lines that I'm directly descended from and added a lot to it.
Oh, that's marvelous stuff. You're so knowledgeable. You're truly knowledgeable about your ancestors. Do you know where they attended schools? Any of your folks?
Mama went to Turkey Run School. I think that was out not far from the church. I think it was, matter of fact, I think it was just on the other side of the church property. So
Is it
quite
your
a few,
mother?
yeah. I think, because there's a picture when Miss Ida Moore was
Yes.
the church musician. She was there when I was a little boy, but we have a picture that was in the Fauquier Democrat. There's Mama, my oldest aunt Edna, my uncle Danny Edmonds, Noble French is a distant relative on the Addison side, and there's a couple other people that you probably know that later ended up in graduating from Taylor.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
So do you know if any of your ancestors went to a Rosenwald school?
I don't think so, Dad. I think Daddy may have, growing up in Warrenton, because the school was up when I was a little boy on right
That's
across
right,
from
John. Right.
Yeah.
Rodney. Yeah. Yeah. He did go to Rosenwald.
Yeah. So they went to the in town and out in the county. They went to whatever educational institutions were available.
Right.
I found out that Daddy and my aunt Eunice Carter's father James Bumry,
Yes.
he went to school down here at the Jenny Dean School.
Oh, he did.
Yeah. So I'm still trying to find a picture of him because we don't have, he passed away when they were little kids.
Yeah.
And we don't even have a picture of it.
So he lived in an area that didn't provide schools for African American children, so they had to go to Manassas to Jenny Dean.
Yeah, because I think at the time they were living in Warrenton or Alexandria Pike.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, but eventually he ended up going to, like a lot of people did in their early, 40s and 30s or so. They were shipped, they stayed down here in the dorms because we don't live far from the Jenny Dean School. It's elementary school now.
Did any of your ancestors have cemeteries near their churches or their properties?
The Edmonds family is buried on family land. The other side of the family land, where my great great aunt Lucy Edmonds' descendants now live. My Bumry.
So where is that?
It's right below. As you're going past the Casanova store, and you're going past. It's a spa over there, and about a half mile past the spa on your left, you turn on. I think it's called Mulberry Lane, and the cemetery is like right there. Once you cross the tracks.
And that's the Edmonds family cemetery?
That's the Edmonds family cemetery. Miss Mary Ashton took me down through the boonies last week when I was at Western Farm, and there may be a old slave cemetery back up in the woods, but they don't have permission to rummage around it. There may be Edmonds ancestors back there. There may be other African American family, but I told them when things go forward, let me know because I would like to know about that. The cat on the like I said, my grandmother's people were primarily from over in Lignum and Stevensburg off of Route 3 in Culpeper.
Right.
Yeah, but she's buried in the Edmonds family cemetery.
Oh, okay. So among your ancestors, do you remember who the oldest person is that you might have talked to? Or
the oldest Edmonds that I spoke to was our great great aunt Lucy Edmonds. She passed away in 1989. And she pretty much lived by herself. Her descendants lived on the road below her, and she was very peculiar in her habits because we used to ride dirt bikes and three-wheelers over there. She would come out on the porch and yell and scream and chase us away, even though I had to tell her, Aunt Lucy, it's us, it's just, I don't care, get on away from around here, y'all making too much noise. So we had to get away from the house, but she was the oldest Edmonds ancestor that I grew up with.
Do you remember any stories from her?
Other than, I guess I'm gonna say it in broad strokes because I don't know if family members are paying attention to this, but she had a way about her. She was pretty much a spinster. She did have one son, John Edmonds, who worked out at the landfill in over there in Hurleytown, and But she and her and two of her sisters lived together, and they were all spinsters too, as far as my mother said. But they all lived in the house together, and they were just very, very rural and very peculiar in some of their habits and behaviors. I mean, particularly if you're looking at it from a young teenager or younger person's perspective, and there were a lot of older people on both sides of my family. They just kind of like, what I tell my wife was they just kind of like look right through you.
Yeah.
And they would
See your
just
soul.
see, yeah. So you just had to
Looking through your
conduct
soul.
yourself in a certain manner and
Right. That's right.
be polite and be respectful.
That's right.
And everything was cool, but they would literally look right through you and just like you just had to, okay, what's this about? I didn't understand it. And just be very polite and very respectful. Even my mother and my grandfather were very respectful to her because she was the eldest person on that side of the family. And it's the same thing on my grandmother's side with the over in Culpeper with the oranges. She would take us over there to visit her relatives. Her oldest sister, their mother was deceased. Grandma Jeannie died 2 months before I was born in '64, and even like the older cousins. My grandmother Edna's one of her oldest cousins was Mamie Grigsby, who eventually founded the Black and Gold Inn down there on 2nd Street, and her home was behind the post office. That was, we called her cousin Mamie, but they never told how we kin. So that was like one of those gaps I had to fill out. I said, oh, she's Granny's older first cousin. That's how my grandmother and I believe a couple of our sisters got from Culpeper up here to Warrenton. One of her sisters was older, 4 years older, and she was Aunt Frances Orange. She married a Robert Piper, and they lived out in Shipmadilly.
So you're related to the Pipers.
That branch
like
of the
Arthur Piper. Did you know Arthur?
Yep. I saw him at his brother's
Jackson.
Milton. Milton.
Yes.
And the youngest one was Aunt Frances called him Kokomo. His name was Harold Piper.
Harold, yeah.
Yeah, so all that's Mama's first cousins on Granny's side. And then, like I said, cousin Mamie and all her descendants are kin to me also. Because her mother,
I knew her as Mamie Bland.
She married a Bland.
Right.
Was it Charles Aubrey Bland? But that was her husband, but she was a Grigsby. But her mother was a Braxton, my great grandmother's sister. So that's how she and my grandmother were first cousins.
Okay. So the Bland that she married, do you know if they were related to Ralph Bland that I know?
Yes, they're kin on
one of the twins, Martha.
That's Martha. Yeah, that's Aunt Martha. She's
right.
she's Daddy and Aunt Nessa's aunt.
Right.
Because her
Mary
brother was my grandfather.
Twins.
Yeah, that was my grandfather's his sisters, his older sisters.
Okay.
So and Uncle Bubba was my grandfather's brother, and Uncle Sidney, he lived down in DC.
John, so, that's June and
Gail
father.
and Wiz's father.
Right.
Yep. So that's yep.
Wow, so we almost kin.
Almost, well, that's Fauquier.
Married to my Aunt Callie.
If you're not directly kin, we almost kin.
Right,
so it's a lot, but some of the names and relations, you just kind of get the information kind of nailed down a little bit further. So like I said, I'm deep in town. I'm deep in the county, and even deeper when you do the genealogy.
Yeah, the roots are deep here in Fauquier, the Edmonds roots. So let's move over to the Cash side.
Yep. So this was the Cashes as the genealogy says, and my father said came from up on outside the plains of a place called Broad Run.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I guess they migrated down to Warrenton. My great grandfather was Humphrey Cash Sr. Humphrey. And then he had his children, one of which was my great grandmother. Her formal name was Louise Constance Cash, but we called her Grandma Lula. She was old when I was a little boy. I think she died.
Lula Cash.
Yes. Yeah. So that was Daddy's great grandmother. She helped to raise him.
Wow. So they lived across the street from the old nursing home.
Yep.
Hospital,
Yep.
because I knew it.
Yep. And that's
Right.
where she was, because I was like a little boy, and she was like another one of those older family members. You had to walk by her bed, and she would just look right through you.
Yeah,
And she, I guess, they all attended Mount Zion in Warrenton.
that's right.
And daddy's my grandmother, daddy's mother's name Ramona, called Ramona,
That's right.
and daddy's aunt was
Miss
Elizabeth.
Liz.
Yeah,
Right.
I called her Aunt Wee Wee. That's all I know.
Is
But
that
she was,
right?
yeah. So that's on daddy's mother's side.
So Miss Liz was she Marilyn's mother?
Yes.
Okay.
So
And
all
Clyde
they're all daddy's first
Corbin's.
cousins. Yep. The Corbins.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
all
So they
daddy's
all
first
lived
cousins.
together in that apartment building.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then
Some of the
across,
Paytons were there.
yeah,
Do you remember the Paytons?
yes, I do. And
Yeah.
then across the street was his aunt and her family, and Ralph was
Oh,
his first.
right.
Yeah.
On Diagonal Street.
Yeah.
Right. Wow, that's amazing. I used to run all around through there. You know, I grew up in Haiti.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'd have occasions to have to go down to the A&P store if they didn't
Yep.
have what we wanted at the Safeway.
Yeah.
And the A&P store was right down on almost across from them.
Yeah, because there's a picture of me when I was like I guess a couple months old. No, it had to be like a year old. And I'm sitting on top of the hood of the car, and it was IGA then.
Oh, okay, that's later years.
So they would. So it's sitting. It's right behind me in the picture.
Is that right? That's awesome.
Because I think it was like an Easter Sunday, and we were going probably to Mount Zion for Easter service, and I was a little boy. So yeah, it had to be like I was almost a year old, sitting on the hood of somebody's car.
Right in front of the IGA.
Well, right in the parking lot in front of the IGA was behind me across the street.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that parking lot in front of the
house. In front of the apartment. Yeah, I remember that place
because it was a nice little. It did come into like a little diagonal shape, even that area.
And something Daddy told me the past several years was that, because that's the only place I knew where he lived at in Warrenton, but he also right there on Horner Street, there was a house that him and Annessa's cousin Georgie and Gilbert lived in when they first got married.
Right.
He said, he told me that's where he was born. Yeah, behind that stone.
That's where he was born.
That's what he told me. He was born there, and he was by a midwife. I don't know what her name was, but it was a midwife gave birth to him, or helped to birth him.
There was a woman, Mrs. Rachel Rector, who served as a midwife to a lot of women in Haiti.
Okay.
And that corner, Horner Street and 5th Street leads to Haiti.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if she might have been.
So that was interesting to find out.
Yes, and then again, a lot of people in the families served as midwives.
Yeah.
Because they were close and handy, and
definitely out in the rural areas
weren't available.
Because I can recall when I was a little boy, any hurt ailment, my grandmother was pretty much my first doctor before you got to the more professional doctor, because they just had
that's right.
They knew how to apply
they did
Vicks Vapor Rub.
Absolutely.
the whole jar. If you
Dentamethylate, whatever. My grandmother, who lived in Haiti, we called her Wee Wee. And she was, her last name was Stradling, and she was known as Dr. Stradling because people would come to her with ailments.
Yes.
Yeah. Or children would run to her with scratches or whatever. Yeah.
So that was my first doctor.
Yes.
My grandmother staying down in Casanova on the weekend. Any boo-boo, scrape, whatever, she knew what to do, how to apply until you got. So you really didn't even need to go to the doctor, because whatever they did,
that's right.
Stuff started healing up, and it's like, okay, I'm good to go then. I can be rough again.
Yeah, pray over you, whatever.
Yeah. They did all of that.
So then most of the Cashes lived right there in that area in Warrenton.
Yes.
On is that Waterloo Street?
Well, I know that they were on Horner Street. Daddy said they were in Haiti. I don't know if directly in Haiti,
Yeah, yeah,
or
Horner
they were,
Street, yeah, runs into
yeah.
Haiti and
But that's what,
Second.
because I grew up, we right there in front of the Joins Funeral Home when we lived in Warrenton.
Right.
So I
I
was always
remember
down
that.
there on Horner Street or in Hayti, particularly
Right.
as I got older and they trusted me to cross the street by myself.
Yeah.
So so all that stuff with Miss Eva Walker Park, that hill up there by where
Right.
Darlene
Horner's
Jones
here.
lived,
Right.
that was like the sleigh ride hill.
Right. I was gonna say the same thing. That's where we'd go. We'd start up on the top of Horner.
Yeah.
Halfway through, we'd have we'd make a little pile of snow, make a little snow bump to make the ride more thrilling.
No, we just went right into that where that little where the water drained off, and that was it.
Right. Yeah. So when you came down the hill, you made a little left, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And down that area was pretty swampy. A lot of children, and generations, my mother's generations and generations back, you know, from Haiti, they used that hill. So, do you know how your Cash ancestors made a living? Most of them.
Pretty much the same. They were either, the women were either domestics or washerwomen, and the men were some type of farm labor or laborer
Yeah.
in town. Daddy said he remembers his I guess it'd be his great uncle Humphrey Cash Jr. Worked at the Rankin store up on
The
Main
hardware
Street,
store.
the
Yes.
hardware store,
Mhm.
and he
Yes.
mentioned his name. He would mention his name, and because our families work for certain employers,
Right.
that's how
Mhm.
you know they knew who he was from.
Right. That's right.
And
That's
and
right.
because the women worked in the homes of certain families in
That's
town
true.
or
That's
outside
right.
of town, he told me that's how he got his first job cutting
That's
grass,
right.
because somebody I don't know if it was Aunt Wee Wee or his great grandmother
Yes.
knew
Right.
going out towards Amosville, that they would come pick him up in town, take him out there.
Mhm.
He cut the grass, and then they bring him back in town. He get his
Yeah.
money.
Mhm. And that's, you know, the word of mouth was so
Yeah.
important back then.
Well, the thing I discovered, like even on the Edmonds side, was we had been around so long
Mhm.
that because the employee relationships were stable,
Right.
you literally spent generations around certain families in
That's right.
town, out in the
That's
rural
right.
areas,
That's
and
true.
that provided the employment. And the other thing I told the folks down in Western last week was, I mean, it didn't hit me until this summer for some reason, was basically our families provided a social safety net for our employers and previously for the slave owners,
Mm.
because we were in the house, outside the house, all around the house. And
Yeah.
I almost want to go from, well, I know I could probably, if the documents are there supported, I can go from Tidewater up into the mountains, because that's how our labor was employed in these households, not just for, a couple of decades, but for generations.
That's right. That's right.
And as my cousin Stephanie Addison said, we Kennedy's people, right? I said, I know, Stephanie. I know. I said, I know there's connections there, but our labor was employed in certain ways, in certain manners. So we literally provided a social safety net for these families in and out of Fauquier County, Warrenton, and so on and so forth, going back centuries.
Yeah. So when you say social safety net, exactly what do you mean?
Because my grandmother was a housekeeper. My grandmother Edna, married into the Edmonds family, was a housekeeper. I saw her put on her white uniform and the white shoes.
Oh, gotcha.
And she did everything for her employers, from childcare to elder care.
Got it.
And what she called the sick and afflicted, or somebody was emotionally disturbed. They took care of all of these people.
They did. That's right. I got you.
They literally took care of these people in numerous ways. All this stuff that are now, you got to have a degree or some type of professional certification. This is how our labor was employed. That's from the enslavement regime, and then later through the segregation regime. And I didn't know why I didn't pay attention to it earlier, but but doing all this talking to you today and to the folks last week, that is what I'm bearing witness to.
Yes.
this is what our labor produced. And
That's
this is
right.
what allowed these, the so-called first families of Virginia and their
Right.
descendants and stuff like that, Robert
Yeah.
King Carter and all these other
Yeah.
rascals. This is what we did in their households.
Yes, I see. And many of their descendants go to college to learn
Yeah.
what our grandparents and, you
I,
know,
I, re, I read these articles about how Thomas Jefferson had, he was so inventive and ingenious and had all this free time. Well, there's a reason why he had all that free time, because
yeah,
who was taking
right,
place of the cooking, the
right,
cleaning,
absolutely. The
from
farming,
from
right,
A to Z.
right, gardening,
That was us.
that's right,
So this is
absolutely.
what I would like for your audience today, and others who come through the center to understand, and move away from these narratives about what people did to us and so on and so forth. No, look at what we did for them.
For them, that's
Look
right.
at what we did, and then had the nerve to come back into our households and make it just as productive, clean, efficient, functional.
Right,
And
yes,
because my grandmother
same way.
Edna, she fed and clothed a lot of people in her, not just her immediate family, but her
That's
extended
right.
family, and then the church families. All that overlap, all that was
That's right.
overlapping
That's right.
out in
That's
the
right.
country, in town, but we don't have the narratives that explain these things to us to make us. This is what I'm once again saying about, look, I'm finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. And
That's
when we
right.
understand these things, our narrative will change. Because if I knew this when I was a little boy, I probably would have been a better student. I would have, did what I was
Right.
supposed to do. But
Yes,
this is where I
absolutely.
am now. But this is what I would like to impart to your audience and to others, that go back and review what grandma and granddaddy and them did, great granddaddy, grandma, so on, and you will see a totally different story, totally different picture. And that's what has happened to me.
That's an extraordinary story about ordinary people. And that's
Yeah,
exactly
a
what
century's old story. You gonna go back to 1619? We can do that up until now and see these,
right.
how their labor was employed to provide a social safety net and support for, their enslavers and later their employers, because that was to get there.
That's right. Awesome. You're a walking history book.
Well, that's one of my other little hobbies. I've always liked history since I was a little boy. That's why I spent so much time in the Fauquier County Library.
Yes, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So where did most of the Cashes attend the church? They went to Mount Zion, probably.
Yeah, they went to Mount Zion when we were living in town.
And they went to Rosenwald.
Yep.
And some of them went to Genealogy.
Yes. Whatever the local educational opportunities, institutions that were around, I'm quite sure my family attended. But something else that I wanted to say, a lot of our learning patterns and practices came from the home.
That's right.
You didn't wait till you got to school to learn.
That's right.
So you go to my grandparents' house. Granddaddy was doing other things, but my grandmother Edna was a Sunday school teacher, later Sunday school superintendent. So that's why we had to go to that old hot Northern Virginia Baptist Center back in the 70s. So, but I just remember on Mama's side, you had to be prepared before you did Sunday school.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
You had to know everything.
That's right.
So
that's right.
I didn't realize that then, but I know it now. And then on Daddy's side, Aunt Wee Wee is the same thing. When you go down to Mount Zion for the Eastern Christmas program, you had to know your part and know it well. And that was fostered at home. That you didn't wait till you got to school to become a learner.
That's right. That's right.
So that's why I'm sitting here now in a that's just one section of books. The rest of them are on the floor. I'm sitting here in a room full of books because my mother taught me to read before I went to kindergarten. I didn't go to Miss Lena Green. I went to Jack and Jill. Everybody else went to Miss Lena Green. I said, no, my parents sent me to Jack and Jill. I said, but I was prepared before I went to school. Right. So that's that learning ethic, that's that work ethic, and it's still with me at 58 years old.
And they gave you that interest in history, who you are and from whence you come.
That didn't come that didn't come from my parents or my grandparents. That came from inside of me, and I've just taken it to where it is right now, and I'm going to keep doing it until like I get too old to get too dead to do it.
Yeah, oh, awesome. So I would imagine that the Cashes are buried out at the colored section of the Warrenton Cemetery.
Yes, that's where the plot is.
Yeah,
In the color section.
That's what they called it down on.
Yeah, you see it on. You can see it on the map because the only headstone there is my great uncle, grandma Mona and Aunt Wee Wee's uncle Henry Cash, because he was a World War I veteran.
Okay.
And it's like several generations of Cash is buried there.
Mm-hmm. So do you have any interesting and endearing memories that you want to share about your Cash ancestors? Who among the Cashes was the oldest person that you knew?
The oldest person I remember is my great grandmother Lula.
Miss Lula.
She was a small little dark skinned lady. And you know, I was scared
Strong
of her.
lady though.
Yeah, but the Wanzer family, she was very close to them in Warrenton, and they actually had photos of her that we didn't have, and they gave them to we call her Sissy, but I guess other people call her Marilyn. And we made copies of them, and so I have the copies, and all the pictures that I've gotten from older family members, I've scanned and put them on my computer. So now they, if I get to change computers, they go up into the cloud, and then when I download, get a new computer, it's downloaded because I have all that stuff on the computer. And
you mentioned the Wanzers.
Yes.
Were they whites?
I remember Miss Florice.
Oh, those Wanzers, right?
Yeah. So I remember
she lived up there where you did.
Yeah.
Well, she was across the yard from you. Yeah.
So that set of Wanzers, they were very close to my great grandmother.
Right.
So they had pictures of our family that we didn't even have.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Mm-hmm.
So we got those pictures from them, and I scanned them and put them on. They're on my computer now. So other family members, where did you get those from? How did you get them? Because I used to, because my grandmother Edna on the Edmonds side would take me to see her older family members. That's how I remember the names. That's how I would get pictures. I even had relatives in DC. I would get pictures. I would scan them, give them back to them. So I have the pictures of the older and now deceased family members that some of their descendants don't even have.
Because people took pictures of people in the community.
Yeah.
And we did that back then. And the children all played together, families came together, for Thanksgivings or whatever, and people came from other parts of town or the county. And there was always the opportunity to take a picture.
So you remember Miss Bean Russell?
Absolutely. Miss Bean lived next door to me.
She and my great grandmother Grace Cash were first cousins because their mothers were sisters.
Well, I thought Miss Vivian she was a Hackley, was she?
She was a Hackley. Her mother was a Cash though. That was
Oh, okay. Oh, her father was a Hackley and her mother was.
Her father was a Hackley, but her mother was a Cash. So my great grandmother Lula had several sisters.
Oh my!
And one married a Hackley. That's Miss Bean's parents, and she married a Russell. So I grew up with cousin Thomas down on Horner Street, and cousin George Melvin out in Friartown. We go out to the cookouts and stuff, and then Bobby Thompson is kin to me because.
Get out here, John.
Yep, his great grandmother.
His great grandmother. Or through the Thompsons.
On the through the Cash side. So his great grandmother was a Cash. She was her name was Sarah. She married a Thompson, and then
okay.
And they went on from there. So they were all my grandmother and Wee's cousins.
So what was her name again?
Sarah. She was a Cash. She married a Thompson.
So she married someone from Mr. Mootsy's line.
Yeah. So Mr. Mootsy, Dietz, all that crew.
Right.
That's all. But they have.
You remember Dietz?
I don't remember him. I remember cousin Mootsy and stuff. But they but they are Cash descendants also.
Because as I talked to John, he says he doesn't know a lot about his father's side. So this is a nice piece of information.
Yeah. I talked to him at the
see.
Juneteenth festival, and I
Good.
explained it to him.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
so,
That's awesome. Have you ever thought about publishing?
oh, everybody's you got to Rodney, you need to do an app, Rodney, you need to publish. I said, I'm just like I don't know. But before time is up, I wanted to explain something. When I would run into dead ends doing genealogy,
Uh-huh.
I would, and since these people are deceased, I'd buy books about the times they lived in, or something
Right.
about their lives. So all my female ancestors who was cleaning, domestics and cleaning women, I bought this book, but this was about young women who would leave the country and go into work in DC as domestics, and everything that entailed. So I could see my grandmother, I can see older family members and what they did in this book, and all the and for the men who were primarily farmers and farm laborers, the bottom rung it's mostly about life in the lower southern states. But that helped me out seeing, because my great grandfather Harry Orange, Henry Edmonds, they were deceased when I was by the time I was born. But I have books that I found that would help fill out the spaces in their lives. So I can't know them or experiencing them, but I know what they were living through.
Okay, can you show us the author of these two books?
Okay, this guy's name is Stuart Tolnoy. If you can see that at the bottom.
Okay.
Stuart Tolnoy.
Okay. And then Living In and Living Out.
This is by I don't know if she's at Howard or she's at another HBCU.
Elizabeth
Clark Lewis. But it's an excellent book explaining to you the lives of domestic workers in DC. So it's similar to what was going on out here in the rural area.
Absolutely. And there might be some people in there that we know.
It's possible. It's possible. Yeah. And understanding the social structure of African-American families, Dr. Elmer P. Martin, he founded the Great Blacks in Wax Museum up in Baltimore, he and his wife. He's got some works on our extended families and why that, and how they provided for one another, and the whole what do they call it? I think they call it figurative kinship. Well, play cousins and sister so-and-so, brother so-and-so. There's a reason why that is. And he documents that in this book. And it's just, there's a number of books that can go into, and this is my, this last book is the subject can be kind of, I guess, touchy for some people, particularly older family members. Okay. There were some patterns and practices on
bring it on
both sides of our family that can't be found and looking at European ancestry. And I have a lot of people in my family who, were very European ancestry, and it shows up in their skin complexion and physical features. I did the DNA. I'm 79% continental African and 21% continental European. So there's no Native American, discernible. I thought there was, but oh well. But
I thought so.
But we look at these things and we focus on that, but this is something that we don't readily focus on. This book is like 30 years old.
Can you bring it down just a little, please? Down just a little, yeah. Africanism. Yeah.
So there were some patterns and practices, particularly out in the country, that were done by certain families that it was like quite, in hindsight, I can see what was going on with some of the medicinal practices, botanical practices, and so on and so forth. And it's documented. So it's a very rich area of, you can't understand certain things about why certain people lived a certain way. And like we talked about last week about how we pronounce things in English. That's still that's this is still this is still around. We speak English differently than
that's right. True language.
Yeah, but this came out in '74, so I had to get this used. And it's
was it Albert Williams?
Dr. Robert L. Williams. So there's an explanation to some things in our family that may not be found in pursuing
Right.
your European ancestry or Native American ancestry. So
Rodney, this has truly been a wonderful class today.
okay, well, I hope I did my part.
It has been stimulating, and you're so knowledgeable in not only in your genealogy, but in Black history and the history of our culture. So we truly, truly appreciate it. And thank you so much for coming in. And
Well, that's
you,
over 40,
yeah.
40 years of reading books.
Well, that's wonderful for all that you have shared. It's truly been an extraordinary experience for this extraordinary woman, this ordinary woman.
So if everybody comes through, and you all have my contact information,
Yes,
tell them if they have questions about whether we can or not, or trying to fill in some gaps about some patterns and practices in the family that just don't make sense to them, because I do it for my wife and her family and so on, and other families. So we just try to keep it filling the gaps.
That's right, and telling the truth.
Yeah,
that's what's so important. As long as it's the truth.
Yeah. I have documentation.
Yeah, I know you do.
I have documentation.
Yeah, you've been very thorough and detailed.
So any kin people or remote
we probably
kin people,
can. We'll just have to figure out how.
Yeah.
Because you can do so many people that I've been to. But we thank you so much again for coming. We truly, truly do. And we'll probably call on you another time.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. As for our next event starting in October, on October the 11th, Darrell Herder, who was born in Pennsylvania and has roots here in Virginia, will come and talk to us about family matters, the journey to discovering our ancestry.
Okay.
And on October 25th, Joseph Roby will come and talk to us about the enslaved at Oakley Farm in Upperville.
Okay.
That should bring on a very, very interesting discussion. So we thank everybody for joining us today, and we certainly thank you, Rodney Jr. But it's very, very stimulating.
Or as they call me in Warrenton, some of them still call me Little Cash or
Little Rodney.
Little Rodney.
Rodney. Yeah, because we used to call Rodney. I didn't realize his name was Rodney until we got married.
Yeah. Or y'all called him Ronnie?
Rodney Cash, yeah. That's what we call him.
Well, that's
some of us did.
That's the nickname they gave me. Since on my mother's side,
right.
they know me as Ronnie. On Daddy's side, I'm Rodney.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't know that. I didn't know I had to mention that to him.
Let's call him Rodney Cash. Yeah. So let's see what some of these chat messages say. Ruth Solomon says that she's adding these recommendations to her Amazon account right now. She's probably talking about the books. A. Thomas says, thank you. Ruth again says, great presentation, so well communicated too. Great job, thank you. And Merle Lewis says, thank you for the very informative presentation. Very great. So we thank you so much again, Rodney.
I think my grandparents would be appreciative.
Yes, indeed. Miss Lula and Miss Wee Wee.
Yep. And Wee Wee too.
Yeah, Wee Wee. So thank you so very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, we're closing out.
Okay. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you, you too.